All right, so we just finished up with resonance structures, and before we get into intermolecular forces, I want to reassure you a little bit that this has been a long chapter. I was just working on chapter 2 slides, and it's much, much shorter. So I don't want you to feel overwhelmed, like, oh my gosh, is every chapter going to be this dense and have this much content? No. And in fact, some people actually put intermolecular forces with chapter 2. But I think it makes the most sense to review all of our Gen Chem knowledge up front. And in theory, you've already seen intermolecular forces before. So we're mixing together some old stuff and some new stuff. So hopefully this is not too much for you, but it is a lot shorter in chapter 2. It's not going to continue to be so overwhelming, hopefully. So at least that's not my goal. I don't want you to be overwhelmed. Okay, so we're going to start with intermolecular forces and what role they play in this class. And if after this video you're still confused, I definitely have other videos on my YouTube channel focusing on intermolecular forces. This is the last little bit because intermolecular forces play a big part in structure impacting function as well. So let's get started. So intermolecular forces are the attractive forces between two molecules. So inter means between, and molecular, obviously, that means molecule. So intermolecular literally means between two molecules. So it's named really aptly, the forces between two molecules. And these forces depend on the structure and bonding of each individual molecule that's interacting. So if you have two covalently bonded molecules interacting, or if you have two ionically bonded molecules that are interacting, that's going to make a difference. So we need to talk more about bonding before we can talk about intermolecular forces. Now this looks really bad. Again, I did figure out how to fix this, but I did not do it before today's video. I just realized. So it'll be better on your personal copy of this, but just to be a little bit clear, right here on the left, we have a carbon single bonded to a carbon, and on the right, we have a carbon single bonded to an oxygen. And so covalent bonds are when we say they're when electrons are equally shared between atoms. This says carbon atoms, but it can be between any atoms. We often say it's like, oh, they're holding hands. And I don't think equally shared is the best. So far we've just said, oh, they're when electrons are being shared between two atoms. So that first one should have said nonpolar covalent bonds, because nonpolar covalent bonds can be when atoms equally share electrons. Now, polar covalent bonds exist due to different electronegativities, and this is an unequal sharing of electrons. So we have polar covalent bonds where two electrons are not equally shared between electrons. That often happens if one molecule has a different electronegativity than the other. And then we have nonpolar covalent bonds where electrons are perfectly, equally, evenly shared between two atoms. So this first one should say nonpolar covalent bonds and then polar covalent bonds. So different electronegativities can cause them to be polar or nonpolar. If they're the same electronegativity, they will be nonpolar. If they're different electronegativities, it'll be polar. And electronegativity is really based on an arbitrary scale. So there's not like a specific way they calculate it, but they did set fluorine is the most electronegative, and they set that to 4. So the electronegativity of fluorine is 4, and cesium is the least, and its electronegativity is 0.7. So fluorine is the most electronegative atom. So if you have fluorine bonded to anything else, it's not going to be an equal bond. If it's covalently bonded, it'll be an unequal bond, and therefore it will hold on to more electrons than the other, sort of like a game of tug of war, and you therefore get a polar bond. You don't need to know the numbers of electronegativities, but you do need to know the trends, and you should know between carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, fluorine, chlorine, sulfur. You should know those kind of like which one is more electronegative than others. I feel like something that gets students a lot is they know that fluorine is the most, oxygen, nitrogen, carbon, and then they know fluorine is the most, and then chlorine, bromine, and iodine. But they're like, what about sulfur versus oxygen? Or nitrogen versus sulfur, or carbon versus phosphorus. So those, you can look at the trend and kind of see so that you remember that. But I'm not usually trying to get you to memorize in this class. I want you to really understand. So let's do this together. Draw in the dipole moments on the molecules below. So you can do that on your own notes if you have them. I will redraw it over here on my notepad. and draw in the dipole moments. Okay, so we have carbon, oxygen on one. Well, I'll do the carbon on the left, just like it is in the slide, and carbon, oxygen on the other. So we have carbon, carbon on the left, carbon, oxygen on the other. So if we are looking at a carbon and carbon bond, these are equally shared, and so we don't need to draw in any dipole moment. But if we're looking at carbon and oxygen, oxygen is more electronegative than carbon. It's closer to fluorine. So what the proper way to draw in a dipole moment is an arrow starting at the more positive side towards the more negative side. So in this case, oxygen is pulling electrons towards itself. So we're pointing in the movement of the arrow of the electrons, just like we do with curved arrows. And then a lot of times people will cross this arrow that's left behind. So it's positively charged and it points towards the oxygen that's negatively charged or partially negatively charged. So this means that the oxygen has more electrons. So instead of it being a nice equal, each carbon has roughly the same amount of electrons, the oxygen is winning the game of tug of war, and those two electrons are really closer to the oxygen. And that means that carbon has a partial, that's what that little sign means, positive, it's missing some of its electrons, and this oxygen has a partial negative, which means it has some extra electrons, more electrons than it really needs. So that's a little quick overview of covalent bonds, polar covalent bonds and nonpolar covalent bonds. And now we can have polar bonds or we can have polar molecules. So again, this picture isn't very good. We have a carbon with 4 fluorines bonded to it. I'll redraw it over on my paper. So you can have polar bonds. Each of these is a polar bond, but not polar molecules. So let's do this together where we draw the dipole moment of every single bond, and then we'll draw the dipole moment overall for the overall molecule. And then we'll determine if it's polar or nonpolar. So we have a carbon bonded to a fluorine. And to get that tetrahedral shape that I showed you before, we use the wedge to say the fluorine's coming towards us, and then this fluorine's coming away from us. Now ask yourself, is there a electronegativity difference between carbon and fluorine? And the answer to that is yes. Fluorine's the most electronegative atom. So try to draw in the dipole moment arrows that point the right way between the carbon and the fluorine. So I'll give you a second to do that. Pause the video if you need to. And now I will draw the carbon is the less electronegative atom, so that's where it starts, and it points towards the fluorine, which is the more electronegative atom. So we leave a little partial, like the cross down here at the bottom, to show that's the more positive side. And every one of these has the same arrow. So each of these bonds is polar. We have 4 polar bonds. And they all have the exact same difference in dipoles. So these fluorines are pulling away from the carbon in the same amount. And what that means, what ends up happening is they cancel one another out. So this should be a review. Hopefully you remember from Gen Chem 1, but if we have 2 arrows of motion putting exactly the same amount and exactly opposite, if 2 people are pulling on a string, for example, if, say, I'm pulling this way on the pin and this is pulling this way on the pin and we pull equally at the same time, nothing's happening, nothing's moving. And that's because those forces cancel one another out. So that happens here where the tetrahedral shape, this fluorine is canceling out the pull of this fluorine. And same thing here. So even though in theory you would expect there to be 4 polar bonds here, this is overall a nonpolar molecule. So polar bonds does not always equal polar molecule. All right, and now let's do something similar with this practice problem. So try to do this practice problem on your own. We have a cis and trans isomer. Hopefully you remember which one's cis and which one's trans. I think you should label which one's which. And then I want you to determine if they're polar or nonpolar. So I will give you a few minutes to do that. Pause the video, figure out what you need to, and then we'll work this together. And I also think you should write if they're cis or trans. Okay, I'm going to assume that you have paused the video. And I'll start by just identifying if there's any electronegativity differences on these molecules. So the one on the left, this has a carbon here and a carbon here. Those are equally sharing. Now we have a carbon to a fluorine, and fluorine is, like we talked about in our last question, much more electronegative than carbon. So we're going to put an arrow pointing towards the fluorine and an arrow pointing towards the fluorine here. Now these are pulling opposite directions, so they're canceling each other out. So overall, even though we have two polar bonds, we have a nonpolar molecule. So that's why you can see that cis and trans bonds and being able to identify them matters, because it can make a big difference in the overall polarity of the molecule. Because here we have the same two carbon-fluorine bonds, but they're pointed in the same direction. So the overall dipole moment is a strong positive on the top part of the molecule and a much stronger negative on the bottom part of the molecule. Sort of like the, should be negative, sort of like the inverse of water, which has two polar bonds. So there are two polar bonds in the molecule on the right. And this overall is a polar molecule. So in general, if you have a trans bond with the same thing on opposite sides, it typically will, like this is two fluorines, it typically has no overall. So drawing the line right through here, we have hydrogen here, hydrogen here. These hydrogens are on opposite side, so this is trans. Drawing the line through here, hydrogen here, hydrogen here. These hydrogens are on the same side, so this is cis. So hopefully you got that right and you can kind of remember some of what we talked about. What does it feel like 100 videos ago? But probably only like 4. All right, I think that is a good place to stop. And now we'll go into, now that we've reviewed bonding and polarity, we're going to get into the different types of intermolecular forces.